Welcome to Meathead Test Kitchen, where food and fitness come to hang out. Nutrition, training, and life. It's all fair game on Meathead Test Kitchen.
Joining us today, a gentleman who has been working with athletes for many years and one of my friends for a long time, Assistant Athletic Director at University of Nebraska, Omaha, Mike Nicola. Hello, sir. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you for coming on. I'm excited to talk about some really nerdy sleep and recovery stuff because I feel like this is everything that when people work out or train for something that they gloss over.
I would agree with you. Really over the course of the last probably 6 to 8 years, sleep has really become a big topic, and probably the area that as teenagers, as young women, young men, they fail to recognize the importance of. So this should be a good conversation, and hopefully your listeners can take something away from it. So
hopefully, yes. I hope that every week, and I don't know if they ever actually do, but usually when we have a guest, they always take something away, even if I don't have anything to offer. Tell us a little bit about your background experience. How long have you been an athletic trainer?
Oh, wow. I've been an athletic trainer for going on year 18 here. So this is my 8th year at the University of Nebraska, Omaha. Prior to that, I was at Iowa Western for close to 7 years, and then spent time at Louisiana State University, LSU. Did a master's degree down there. Have a certification in athletic training, certification as a strength and conditioning coach. So have a little bit of background working with college level athletes. So
you know a few things, yeah.
Hopefully I can impart some wisdom. So
cool. Well, let's get into it. When we talk about training, I feel like a lot of people focus on the workout being the most important part, and we've already covered this a little bit, but we're going to get into it more in depth now. When in reality, recovery is the most important component. So can you break down exactly why recovery is the most important part of your training? Yeah.
And recovery encompasses several things. You know, as you mentioned, some people say the workout's the most important. Recovery is very important. It allows for improved performance, permits time for our body to heal itself after bouts of exercise, and then really recover itself so that it's ready for the next training load. And then it decreases your risk of potential injury. So those are kind of the three big things on why recovery is important, but there's a lot of things that affect recovery. So we talked about sleep. What about stress levels, nutrition, hydration, frequency, and type of training loads? And then a big one, and one that younger people don't quite realize as much, but your alcohol intake.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of factors that affect your recovery. But I guess the biggest thing is these factors can all be manipulated and controlled by ourselves.
Yep.
Yeah.
100%.
And I was actually going to kind of jumping off of that, since we know those things are true, can we talk about how recovery isn't 100% the same for each individual person, and maybe some of the cues that your body gives you automatically that maybe you don't necessarily pay attention to because you're not as in tune as you could be?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things is look at your performance in your day-to-day life, not just in your exercise routines, but whatever else it is you do. How is your decision-making skills? How is your alertness level, your mood, your energy? Those are things that your body gives you as cues to how well you're recovering. Even with sleep, sometimes people say, I overslept. Well, that's your body telling you it's had enough.
Yeah. So, it needs more.
Yes. and it's kind of a badge of honor. Sometimes people say, oh yeah, I can survive on 5-6 hours of sleep. Well, the problem is the average adult needs about 7 to 9 hours of sleep. There's great research out there in terms of injury risk with sleep. Those that sleep less than 8 hours have 1.7 times greater risk of injury. So that's That's a good statistic out there, good piece of research. There's been a lot of research done with regards to sleep and athletic performance, such as free throw shooting with basketball players or 3-point shooting percentages. There was a good study done by a Dr. Sherry Ma out at Stanford University, who worked with Stanford University's basketball team and showed that 3-point percentage shooting increases when the basketball players averaged 8 hours of sleep. So there's some research out there in terms of sleep being important, but the biggest thing that I think sleep does is it increases when we lack sleep. It increases our cortisol in our body, which is a stress hormone. And when we have higher levels of cortisol, it decreases our testosterone production, which then in turn affects our muscle protein synthesis. So we're unable to repair muscle tissue from exercise bouts. So that's huge. What that also does, though, is if we have higher stress levels, how's our mood? Our mood is affected.
Yep.
So, a lot of things like that. Sleep, when we get plenty of sleep, our ability to produce growth hormone increases. Less sleep, less growth hormone, less ability to repair damaged tissue. So we want that growth hormone, because one of the reasons a lot of us lift weights or exercise is to be stronger, better body tone, muscle tone. So if we're not getting the sleep to produce our growth hormone, are you really seeing the full benefits of your workout?
Yeah, you're kind of self-sabotaging yourself at that point, and that sucks.
Yeah. Like speaking of that too, like I know that alcohol does affect all of those things also. And you brought that up before. Can you discuss how and why, like exactly how that affects adversely the effects and your recovery?
Well, what alcohol does is it affects really our ability to sleep. So if you're not getting great sleep because you decided to tie one on the night before,
Drunk sleep is the worst.
Yes, it is. And then all of a sudden now it's not quality sleep. So you're not able to get into that rapid eye movement sleep where you have that ability to produce growth hormone. So now all of a sudden you're tired, you're fatigued, your mental alertness is decreased. So alcohol has the effect, but it has the after effect because of the sleep.
Mm-hmm. Also dehydrates you, which sucks too.
Yeah. I mean, go back to what I mentioned earlier, the factors that affect recovery. Hydration is huge. For the average person, we always say drink 8 cups of water a day. Well, somebody who's exercising and sweating a lot, athletes in general, we try to tell them drink 2 liters of water, and for every pound you lose, you should drink about 32 ounces of water.
Yeah. I feel like if you're well hydrated, you'll know, because you're going to the bathroom every 30 to 45 minutes. Like that's when you're in the zone. I feel like you had to wake up twice to pee in the middle of the night. You're properly hydrated. Good for you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then here's the other hard part, though, is people think, oh, I just drink it all at one time. Well, your body doesn't absorb it very well when you drink all your water in one sitting. So you got to space it throughout the day, and we all get busy, and so the water sits on your desk or it sits at the table, and you forget about it. So
make it easier by doing things like Crystal Light and tea. That's my hack for the day. FYI, if you want to drink more water. People often reach for the ice bag when they feel that nagging ache or pain from training or sports. And we've started to see that maybe ice isn't the answer anymore. So what do you recommend for soothing those angry muscles and joints?
Well, yeah, when I first started, the biggest thing was the acronym RICE, rest, ice, compression, elevation. Those were the 4 things that solved everything. And then as people started to do more research, we start learning more. Delayed onset muscle soreness is what I think we're trying to get at here.
Yep.
And delayed onset muscle soreness, the best thing, and this is what I tell athletes all the time, what'd you do the day before? I exercised. Well, then let's go exercise again. Let's get that blood flowing. As we get that blood flowing, we're going to get some increased flexibility, increased the heart rate. So, that's kind of my number one go-to, but that's not the easy answer. We all want things that feel good.
Yep.
The feel good. So whether it's a hot pack, it's the foam rolling, the self myofascial release, the percussion massage therapy guns are huge right now. And you can find those online on Amazon. For prices vary.
Yeah, they have a million. I have a really cheap one right now. I think mine was like a $30 Conair. I got it at CVS, but it does the job.
Exactly. And they're all the same. They all do the same thing. And those feel good. And that's really what everybody's looking for, is what feels good. And that's all that matters. Epsom salt baths are huge. The research behind that, it's good. And I always tell athletes, I tell people that work out, athletes, the weekend warriors, whatever you feel good doing, do it.
Yep.
If you have a legit injury though, where I said, hey, I was running, I rolled my ankle stepping off the curb, then let's go to the ice. But if you just have muscle soreness and you're just looking to feel good, whatever it is you like, whether you've tried all of these and there's one that sticks out, stick with it. There's no wrong answer.
Yeah. I think that really, the next question I had really works well with your answer to that. Can you talk about why addressing these things is important, and what it looks or feels like to take sometimes a much needed active recovery day or even an extra rest day?
Yeah. So in active recovery, and everybody has their own definition of what active recovery is.
Yes.
Active recovery might be just going on a walk for some. Active recovery may mean I'm doing this very similar exercises that I did a day before, just with body weight. So, and really active recovery, the whole purpose is just to get blood flowing, to allow some flexibility. I believe you may go this route, you may jump into this, but we talk about range of motions. And one of the things about active recovery is you're trying to maintain or contribute to an increase in flexibility or mobility. People like to use the word mobility more so than flexibility. Flexibility kind of refers more to stretching. I'm not a huge static stretching fan. But we're so ingrained in static stretching.
Yep.
So you sit on the floor and reach for your toes. Well, there isn't a huge benefit to that. But back to the original question you had, Sausha, about active recovery. Huge fan of active recovery. Whatever activity it is that can elevate your heart rate for a short period of time, but putting less stress on the joints is beneficial. So I'm not looking for a bunch of weight on a bar and calling that active recovery. That's not much different than what you did the day before.
Right.
It doesn't mean a longer walk. Does it mean instead of going on a run, you hop in the swimming pool and you do something in the pool? Again, just something to elevate the heart rate, to allow the blood to flow, and incorporating maybe some dynamic stretching or some dynamic flexibility. A big one that I really like is incorporating hurdles. And we do hurdle walkovers, walking under hurdles, some skips, different things like that help with hip mobility.
Yeah. And that stuff feels good. Like my favorite active recovery day, like my top of the mountain, is probably going for a walk and even just like 20 minutes of yoga, just some stretching, moving, and then like adding a Epsom salt bath to that, just to like soothe those muscles, because it's super important. When you're tight, the best thing to do is move.
Yeah.
Like, because you're not going to get untight by sitting on your butt.
It like the one thing you want to do is not move, but it's super counterproductive. Like my favorite, I just hop on the air bike for like 10 minutes and then whatever feels shitty.
Yeah.
I'll do
Yeah. Those
I'll
hurdles sound great.
Yeah.
For the hip mobility.
Yeah.
Like you just did a ton of squats
I
or
have
deadlifts. Like
stupid hips.
open
They're
those
the
hips
worst.
up.
I need to buy a hurdle for the garage.
Yeah.
We need one now at HQ. So we've talked about sleep, we've talked about recovery. Let's talk about actually getting into some workouts. It seems like people often will skip their warm up or cool down because they're boring. So let's break that trend because I know it's important. We know, like we all know it's important. We need to tell people why it's important. Explain why warming up and cooling down is so crucial to muscle recovery and avoiding injury.
Yeah, great point. It is often left out. Probably the cool down more so than the warm up.
Mhm.
But the purpose of the warm up is to increase the heart rate. If you worked out a couple days before, you still have some of that DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness. It'll help decrease some of that before you get into your workout. Dynamic stretching has been shown to positively influence power, speed, agility, endurance, flexibility, and strength performance. So those are things that dynamic stretching can help you with if you incorporate it into your warm-up. And then the other thing with your warm-up, you want to consider that the beginning of your workout. So then that way it's going to mimic slightly some of the same movements you're doing in your workout. So one of the biggest things is if you're going to incorporate squats and bench press and some sort of core stability activity into your workout, you want to make sure that in your warm-up you're addressing all of those movements. So there's 3 planes of movement. There's sagittal, transverse, and frontal plane movements. Your warm-up should incorporate all of that. So you shouldn't just be in one position the whole time, and incorporate movement during your warm-up. So does that mean that maybe you're doing a dynamic quad stretch RDL? It could be that. It could be a simple high knees, or we talked a little bit about the hurdles, where you may lift your leg up and almost, I refer to it as open the gate or close the gate, where you rotate your hips. So you're getting some rotation, a lunge and rotation, those types of things. Just to incorporate that into a warm-up. And the warm-up, we're not talking a long period of time. We're talking 5 to 10 minutes max. But again, just trying to elevate the heart rate, preparing you for activity. When we bypass the warm-up, we increase our likelihood of injury. If you just go into the weight room or into a sprint workout without any sort of warm-up, your chances of pulling a quad muscle or pulling a pec muscle greatly increase. So that's the purpose of the warm-up, just to prepare the body for intense activity.
Yeah, I'm that person when I post, like I do time lapse Thursday every now and then when I actually remember to take my GoPro out to the garage with me. And somebody commented on Instagram the other day, they're like, Jesus, your warm up takes almost as long as your workout. And I'm like, well, the warm up is its own workout in a sense. I mean, you're doing air squats, you're doing lunges, you're doing pull aparts, you're doing hyperextensions because you're doing squats that day. And, it's a million things. But yeah, if you're actually doing advanced work in any level of fitness, your warm up has to match your workout.
I honestly, one of my favorite sayings that goes along with warming up, but did you die though? Because now you're ready. Like you should be at that point, because it's trying to mimic your workout. Yeah. You should be not totally gassed, but ready to go. That's when I do all my bitching when I'm in the gym, just during my warm up. Right. I'm sitting there in my bottom squat, my bottomed out squat with my kettlebell. Like, this is awful. I hate my life. But the movement feels way better when you're actually in the workout than if you just went in cold. I used to never warm up. And if I did, it was maybe three minutes, and I wasn't doing anything except walking on the treadmill, which does nothing to warm up my body if I'm going to be lifting any weight at all.
Right. Yeah. This is one thing where people, I feel like, just don't make the connection.
Yeah. And I feel like maybe cool down isn't quite as important as the warm up, but what are the benefits of doing a cool down period also?
Well, the cool down, I've kind of changed a little bit in terms of how I approach the cool down. It kind of to your point, Sausha, it's not as important, but there's some benefits to it. So a lot of the things, if we're looking at high explosive activities that we've done, maybe you're doing more Olympic lifting that day, or you're doing more sprint workouts. I find the cool down is a great time to incorporate your foam rolling.
Yes.
You know, an opportunity to do maybe some yoga stretches. You've been using these muscles, and really when we talk explosive movements, we're not going typically through full ranges of motion. So this is our opportunity to go through that full range of motion and elongate those muscles and tendons, and give them an opportunity to relax, maybe remove some lactic acid in those legs. Blood pools, gravity takes over. It wants to sit in our feet and our ankles, our calves. So if we get an opportunity during that cool down to just relax those muscles, bring the heart rate back down. A lot of people will just say, you know what, the walk around the facility, putting all my weight away, or the walk to the car is my cool down, and they go back. Well, there is some benefit to doing a cool down. It will decrease some muscle soreness the following day. Some of that muscle soreness is caused from the lactic acid buildup from lifting.
Yeah. And that is for me where I found that's where I started to build my flexibility was at the end of my workouts. People don't realize that you just put your muscles through hell and they might be tired, but when they're warm is when they're the most like cooperative.
Pliable.
Oh, it's great, dude. Have you ever felt the sensation of sticking your forehead straight on the floor before? Like that's a cool feeling.
I physically, like when I'm doing those movements, this is probably weird. I'm weird. But I like physically imagine like my muscles are like legitimately like stretching themselves out at that point.
It's like a cat waking up from a nap.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you brought it up, Sadie, the fact that you go from moving 100 miles an hour to just a sudden stop if you bypass the cool down.
Yeah. And I'm going to loop back to the warm up for a second, because this is something I forgot to say earlier. Your first set of warm up movements are going to feel like shit. Like that's the point.
That's the whole
your
entire
squat, your hips are going to be tight, go extra slow. But yeah, this is a key that I feel people just miss a lot. The warm up, the cool down, everybody wants to focus on the actual workout because that's the sexy part. That's where you move all the weights.
But how sexy is it if your muscles aren't warmed up? Like you're not going to pull the weight or push the weight or do anything with the weight that you were expecting to that day if you don't do the warm up. I mean, you're going to have probably a shitty workout that day and then be like, what the hell?
If you try to do squats without warming up your hips, you're going to quarter squat every rep and people are going to be like, what are you doing? Like it's at that point, I'm not going to say it's a waste of your time, but you could have utilized your time and energy better.
Yeah, for sure.
Like for sure. 100%. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but there's a better way to do it.
Back to your point though, a little bit in the warm up, that's your opportunity to make sure that you've got proper technique, and if you skip that warm up, you go straight to putting weight on and you don't have proper technique, you may not be doing that exercise for a few weeks.
Yeah. That's the biggest thing. Like you can't work out when you're injured. Straight up.
Right.
So avoid being injured at all costs possible. And that might mean you have to build an extra 15, 20 minutes into your workout routine just to make sure you have a proper warm up and cool down. But as someone who has been lifting weights at an intermediate to advanced level for, 3 or 4 years now, I've never had an injury because I actually do your bitch work.
Yeah.
It's not fun all the time, but it's worth it because your knees aren't going to blow out when you've got 185 pounds on your back. You're not going to pull a hip flexor while you're doing a box jump. Like just do your pre-work, like do all of your pre-work and your post-work and it'll feel great. It'll actually help with your DOMs a lot. Yeah. Especially if you invest like $20 in a foam roller.
Yeah.
Like that thing is the devil. But
it
also
hurts.
Awesome at the
but
same
just think,
time.
Visualize the lactic acid just dispersing.
You can just see it going away.
But in that, you talk about the foam roller hurting. Well, it's hurting because the muscle's tight.
Yep.
If the muscle was loose and pliable, it doesn't hurt as bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, the foam roller. It's my best friend, but my worst friend. And we've talked a little bit about range of motion already today. Range of motion is really important when it comes to lifting weights or playing sports. What are some of your favorite moves for improving one's ROM?
For improving, really, I think the best way to improve your range of motion is during your lifts. Make sure that you're going through a full range of motion. Now, there's obviously some exercises you'll do, and we touched on them a little bit already, like plyometrics, where you don't go through full ranges of motion. But during some of your lifts, if you go through a full range of motion, that's the best way to improve it, is by doing that. And the benefits, you see greater benefits in going through a full range of motion. It provides better joint stability, better muscle balance. And for some people, you end up activating more muscle groups. Let's take the squat, for example. If you're squatting and you're only doing a partial squat, you're putting a lot of stress on your quads.
Yeah.
Well, if you go through a full range of motion, now you're going to incorporate your glutes. So, the glutes are huge, and every time you go to stand up from a chair, you're using your glutes. So why not use your glutes in a squat? So, but again, there are exercises where you don't go through full ranges of motion. So you have a balance there. The other thing is, you will see people in a gym not go through full ranges of motion. Bodybuilders, a prime example. We talk about it, or you hear about the word, the pump. Okay.
Yep.
Well, you want, as a bodybuilder, you want that extra bulge in the bicep, or you want that quad to really stand out. Well, if you only work in a certain range of motion, you're going to get increased blood flow and increased lactic acid in that one area. So you're really working the tone of one particular area. Whereas if you go through the full range of motion, you will see greater strength gains throughout the range of motion. I always like to use the example, if you're bicep curling and you're only going from 90 degrees to your mouth, that's all you're going to get stronger doing.
Yep.
Right.
So
exactly. We've covered a ton of stuff today, and I think all of it's been super important, but like anything, there may have been things that we forgot. Is there anything that you wanted to add that we may have forgotten that are super important?
I think, we touched a little bit on sleep. I think that there's one thing that I leave with your listeners: the importance of sleep. There is no badge of honor for getting 5 hours of sleep and being able to operate the next day if you are trying to maximize your gains in the weight room or in a performance setting. Sleep is just so important. It's tough to train. It's tough to get great benefits if you're not getting great sleep, because chances are you're going to be injured. You're going to have an increased risk of colds or flus. You're not going to repair. You're not going to see the muscle tone, the increase in the ability to move weight around. You're not going to see sprint times decrease if you're not getting your sleep. And again, I think so many of us have just become accustomed that, I just need a little bit of sleep, I can get through the day. But your decision making, your alertness, your mood, I know I'm a happier person if I'm getting my sleep, and my family likes me a lot more.
Yeah. I actually, when I was younger, I prided myself on, I only need 5 to 6. Your girl in bed at 8 o'clock most nights now, because she wakes up at 4. I need the full 8. And if I can get more, I'm super excited about it. 9, 10 is fantastic.
And some things that I'll give your listeners here is kind of some recommendations to increase sleep. I think the biggest thing is have a routine. So whatever time you decide that you need to wake up the next day, back up 7 to 9 hours from that time, and that's the time you should go to sleep. Yeah. Have some sort of bedtime routine. Is that reading a book for 30 minutes Some people do yoga before they go to bed, just some light yoga. Whatever that bedtime routine is, stick to it. And then make sure your room is cool, dark, and quiet.
Yep.
Yeah.
That has been huge when I figured that out. Get darkening curtains, get the heavy ones because A, they block out the light, B, they block out the noise. Get a fan and make sure you don't have TV on when you go to sleep have been like the most helpful things for me to actually have a sleep schedule.
Yeah.
One thing about TV, so the blue light, not only in TV, but also in our devices, our phones, our iPads, our computer screens. On Apple, and I know they're on other phones as well, but turn your night shift on.
Yep.
The night shift on your phone reduces the blue light. Blue light is a stimulant. So if you can reduce that blue light, it'll help you and not stimulate the brain, so it's easier to fall asleep if you have to be on a device before you go to bed.
Science, technology.
It's amazing.
I love that they do that for us now.
Amazing advice. Yeah, absolutely.
So there you go. Get your sleep.
With that said, though, look at there's been some things that have come out recently, and on some of the biggest sports stars and how much time they sleep. Tiger Woods is not a big sleeper, but LeBron James is a huge sleeper. He sleeps like on average 10 hours a night.
And he takes naps.
Yeah.
During the day.
Well, then I saw Cam Newton. They posted that graphic a couple weeks ago during that game where he gets up at like 4:30 and then whatever. He only gets like 6 hours of sleep. It's like, bro, you're an NFL quarterback. Why aren't you sleeping? Like, I sleep more than you and I just lift weights in my garage. Like, what's up? Yeah. Cool. Thank you, sir.
Join Sadie and Sausha every Monday, helping to make your fitness and nutrition journey suck less. MTK.